How can we handle elections if coronavirus is around in the fall? One idea is mail-in voting, where voters send in their ballot instead of showing up at a voting booth. Many states are moving in this direction. For instance, California will have mail-in voting for the November election in 2020. There's even been a push by Democrats in Congress to make mass mail-in voting available nationwide. But is mail-in voting a good idea? Here are 4 reasons we should think twice before letting it happen, even during a pandemic. Number 1, mail-in voting is more ripe for abuse than absentee voting. For many Americans, absentee voting, where you return your ballot by mail, is a familiar experience, especially if work or your health prevent you from going to your local polling place. However, mail-in voting and absentee voting have key differences. One must typically apply to be an absentee voter, though, of course, laws vary by state. Some states require specific reason for absentee voting and others don't. Mail-in voting, on the other hand, doesn't require you to apply. The state simply mails ballots to all registered voters. If a state's voter rolls are at all off, that means people who no longer live in the state could get ballots, providing an opportunity for unscrupulous people at their old address to vote for someone else. And state voter rolls are often out of date. According to a 2012 Pew study, 1 out of every 8 voter registrations in America is out of date or inaccurate. Number 2, absentee voting is a source of voter fraud. Even putting aside the issue of out-of-date voter rolls, just because absentee voting is relatively common doesn't mean it works well. Absentee voting may be a bit safer, but it certainly does not come without its own problems. Absentee ballot fraud typically occurs when someone other than the registered voter requests the absentee ballot, then votes in their place. Fraud can also occur when a ballot acquired from a voter is cast or when a voter's signature is forged. Absentee ballot fraud is the most recorded form of voter fraud, according to a Heritage Foundation database of voter fraud cases. It has the most potential for abuse. For instance, John and Grace Fleming were both found guilty of duplicate voting, once by absentee ballot in New Hampshire, and then in person in Massachusetts. In 2016, according to the Wall Street Journal, over 8 registered voters in San Pedro, California, received absentee ballots at the same apartment. And it isn't just the Heritage Foundation. Conservatives are worried about expanding absentee voting and higher voter fraud. According to the conclusion of a bipartisan 2005 report, the Commission on Federal Election Reform, which was co-chaired by former Democrat President Jimmy Carter, absentee ballots, quote, remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. Number 3, a history of unreliability. So let's say someone legally fills out his ballot and mails it in. Does that mean his vote is definitely counted? Unfortunately, no. Some states lose or simply don't count mail-in ballots. According to data compiled by the Federal Election Assistance Commission between the years 2012 and 2018, over 28 million mail-in ballots remain unaccounted for. Mark Hemingway, who writes for Real Clear Politics, said, quote, "States and local authorities simply have no idea what happened to these ballots since they were mailed. And the figure of 28 million missing ballots is likely even higher because some areas in the country, notably Chicago, did not respond to the federal agency's survey questions. This figure does not include ballots that were spoiled, undeliverable, or came back for any reason," end quote. If mass mail-in voting becomes common, it will likely coincide with more so-called ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is a process in which political organizers collect absentee ballots from voters and then deliver them to polling places en masse. So one political organizer could go to, say, 100 homes, pick up their ballots, and then deliver them to a polling place. Nearly 30 states allow ballot harvesting to some degree, but it is unfortunately ripe for abuse. For instance, the North Carolina State Board of Elections overturned the results of the 2018 election for the 9th Congressional District due to illegal vote harvesting. A political operative working for the Republican Party was accused of collecting hundreds of absentee ballots, then never submitting them, or changing them to vote for specific local candidates. To sum it up, mail-in voting is ripe for voter fraud, and it could result in many Americans' votes not being counted. Before Americans switched to an unreliable and on a mass scale, untested system of voting, Perhaps we should just consider making our traditional in-person places of voting safer.